Hi, everyone. I'm Don Rooney.
And I'm John Timpane.
Welcome to the Musical Innertube, the podcast born out of a mistake.
We once meant to introduce a soothing musical interlude, but we said soothing musical Innertube, and the name stuck.
On this podcast, we talk to interesting people about their interesting lives, jobs, hobbies, and passions.
Difference makers who really make a difference.
We are just so happy today to have Megan Timpane as our guest on the Musical Innertube. I love Megan because I have to. She's my niece and a very talented, funny, and quite beautiful lady. She's an actor, a stand-up comic, and a conceptual theater artist who has produced and performed in film, television, and on the web. She has just finished a San Francisco run of her new show, Lymphomaniac. In true Megan style, it derives comedy and wisdom from her journey with having cancer. Lymphomaniac is going to have runs very soon in Los Angeles and New York, and putting a real exclamation point on it, she'll be at the Edinburgh Fringe in Scotland performing Lymphomaniac, August 13th to 24th. As we'll hear in a moment, Megan was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma about a decade ago. She's been in remission for a long time, and Lymphomaniac is actually her second comedy show about her experience. We'll find out about the first and much, much else right now. Welcome, Megan Timpane.
Thank you. Thank you both so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Megan, take us back to that day when you learned that you had Hodgkin's lymphoma. I mean, obviously, you're such a strong person and so positive. I can just attest to that. But I'm wondering what it was like at first. Did you go through all that denial and resistance and bargaining and all that stuff?
Yes to all of those things. It was a mix of emotions for sure. I was a year out of graduating from UCLA's theater school, and I was acting, and I was living in Hollywood, and I basically was just starting to gain some momentum in my acting career. I was getting a lot of auditions and starting to get called back, and casting directors were starting to know who I was. And unfortunately, this, in one sense, sprung itself on me. And in the other sense, I'd been having some symptoms for 8 or 9 months or so and didn't know exactly what they were and what was going on. But the day that it happened, I could barely walk, and I had to drive myself to the emergency room or to my doctor's office, which was just a couple blocks from my house, thank goodness. And they pricked my finger, and I fainted right there and was wheeled into the emergency room. And I had 3 emergency blood transfusions, followed by tests, scans, all of those things. And I remember the doctor initially told me that he thought I had leukemia. And of course, growing up, you see movies, and leukemia is a buzzword for cancer, and especially for cancer for younger people. Yeah. And there have been, a lot of movies about it. And I thought to myself, there's no way I could have leukemia. I don't look like those people in the movies who look sickly or anything like that. And it turns out the next day I found out it was not leukemia. It was in fact lymphoma, which I, at the time, didn't even know was cancer. I remember running to my mom and saying, "Mom, I'm so lucky I don't actually have cancer." And she said to me, actually, man,
Yeah.
Megan, you need to go back to school. No, but it was shocking. It was shocking.
Yeah.
You don't think something like this can happen to you at a young age. And even when I found out I was sick, I had stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma. I still felt relatively healthy. I was still going to the gym every day. I was still able to audition. I was still hanging out with friends. There were a lot of mixed emotions. It felt very much like, why me? Also, as an actor, on some sick level, there was that moment of like, oh my gosh, I get to look in the mirror and finally say, I had caffeine. And it's real. And it's like that moment that you think you're going to have that wins you an Oscar, but it was real. And it was so weird to say that out loud. And it felt almost embarrassing. Like your life is just now put on pause. You can't do anything else. So yeah, I cried a lot at first, a lot. And I felt really, really bad for myself, but you find a way somehow to get through it. And I was still young and, like I said, relatively healthy otherwise. So you just find a way to navigate this new normal in the best way that you can, I think. And that was through the help of friends, family, humor, all the things that I had been relying upon for my life up until that point.
The doctors can be very blunt or they can be very helpful. So which were your doctors? Were they blunt and sorry, or were they helpful in steering you in the right direction to try to get well?
To be quite honest, I don't remember the initial person that came in, because when I went into the hospital, the first time I went into the hospital and found out that I was sick, it was in a hospital. It was like Hollywood Presbyterian. It was near my house. It's not known for treating cancer. I just happened to go to the emergency room there because my primary care doctor was there. And there were a lot of different people going in and out throughout, because I was there over a weekend. So I even had to wait a few days to get a surgeon to do the actual surgery on me and get the pathology done. So there were so many people in and out of the room that what I associate with my care team was at UCSF in San Francisco, where I was treated. And I will say, it's funny, I actually do impersonations of the doctors, the nurses, the people that check in. I teach people being a life of chemo during the show. And one of the jokes that my doctor was actually very afraid of me. He was a young guy and he was relatively new to UCSF oncology. And I think my mom and I really scared the shit out of him. And I came in hot with a lot of energy. I was the youngest person being treated there. I was the only person anywhere near my age. So I think that he was a little scared, a little bit more reserved, and tried to keep us on track in terms of energy and just prognosis and all these things. But there were times when he had to crack and laugh and really be human. But I honestly wouldn't have had it any other way. He was very clinical, I would say. Didn't have like the warmest bedside manner, but he also ended up then he's a character in my show, and he's seen the show, which is everyone who's in the show has seen the show, which is really cool. So
that's really a great thing to think about, is that everybody who helped you has gone to see it. And I bet you have they had notes afterwards? Did they did they give you some? Well, see, when I said I didn't mean, and you made me, and now
well, I made sure to check in with all of them before I performed them, to ask their permission to do a character of them. And they knew that I was there was no hiding that I was an actor in the oncology ward. I was doing voices and reading scripts in the corner with all of my friends and constantly being told I had to stop because I was disturbing other patients. And
this is the biggest laugh riot dialysis you've ever seen. I actually hung out with Megan for a couple of hours during one of the sessions, and you were just rattling on and driving.
Well, now, were you in the corner with your acting friends, and here's a room full of people who have been diagnosed with cancer, and you're in the corner with your acting friends? I'm going to die.
My acting teacher from high school came in, and we read like 4 plays while I was there in different voices, and they ended up putting us in another room. All the different nurses would come over and they'd want to hear clips of what we were doing, because it is really sad when you're in a position like that, because everyone around you is doing so much worse than I was doing, because I was young. I had a good prognosis. I had what is considered the good cancer to have because it's curable. But unfortunately, not everybody was having that same experience as I was. So as much as I was, engage with all of my friends and still young and doing, doing all these voices and things, I had to be cognizant of the fact that that wasn't everyone's experience. And so it might not have always been appropriate. Put us in the corner every time we came or put us in a different room. And yeah, as it went on, as you probably know, chemo gets progressively worse with time. And I was less and less able to have that much energy, but it does help you get through it. It really did help me not focus on feeling like, not focusing on my mortality while I was there. Really, really helpful.
It occurs to me that it might have been a good idea to have, let's put on a show, do a show for those poor people who are sitting in bed with nothing else to do but contemplate the situation they're in and the pain that they're in. It might have been fun to have a little show with you guys, but hey, it's past, and I'm not in charge of a hospital. So.
I just want to say for our listeners that all three of us have differing experiences with cancer. Don very bravely helped his wife for many years, the blessed Lauren, who was such a wonderful person and put up with Don. We still don't understand that, but she did, and Don was amazing about it. And so, yeah, he does know about what the treatment can be like, what the transfusions and everything can be like. And I have a little bitty tiny shade of cancer in my boy parts. It's not bad. I mean, yeah, I could still die from it, but not right away, and certainly not in the foreseeable. However, having it and knowing that you have it does change your perspective, doesn't it? It just does. It's suddenly, yesterday I didn't have this to think about. Today I do. So we all understand this. I'm wondering too, and that's where Don was going with his last comment. When did you know that you were gonna act about this? When did you know that this was going to be? When did you say, what I need to do is to do a show?
Well, interestingly enough, it didn't start out as an active thought or a conscious thought, rather, to create something out of the experience. But I was struggling with my mental health during the time, and I had a lot of anxiety, and I had been trying to find ways to make myself feel better. And one of the things I came to was writing down 5 things I was grateful for every day. And the more I started writing, so first it started off like, I'm grateful I was able to walk around the block today, or I'm grateful that I could eat a full meal today, or I'm grateful I went and got ice cream today, things like that. Like, I'm grateful my white blood cell count was high enough so I could see my friends. And then as I started writing, it almost like it got exponentially expansive as I started writing, because I couldn't every day just write, I'm grateful that I walked around the block. The more you open yourself up to what is good happening around you, the more you start to see. And so what I started writing about was, I'm grateful for the woman who checked me in today. She is so hilarious, and she said this funny thing. And it started turning into a lot of interactions that I was having at the hospital. And because I was spending so much time at the hospital, whether it was chemo or checkups or shots or things like that. And as I started writing that, I was like, wait a second, these are characters. They're people, but in my mind, in the way that I view the world as a comedian, they are characters or caricatures of themselves that started to form in these stories, these true stories and interactions of ironic moments that I would have that made me laugh and made me smile. The show almost wrote itself. And I was towards the end of my treatment and started to get into the very philosophical, what does this mean? Who am I now? Perspective shift that I think a lot of people have when they go through cancer. And that started to shape, wait a second, what is it that I want? If I were to say something, what is it that I would want to say about this? And at the time, we had met a performer of a bunch of one-man shows in San Francisco. He's very well known locally. His name's Don Reed, and he was performing at the Marsh, and he used to be the stand-up comedian the warm-up comedian for The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. And I reached out to him because he went to UCLA, and I had seen one of his shows, and I met him after one of the shows, and I told him my story and that I'd been through cancer, and we stayed and talked for 2 hours and just did voices and impersonations. And I said, it would be really cool to write I've been thinking about writing a show about this. And I go, isn't having cancer just hilarious? And he goes, that's it. That's your show. That's the name of the show. He goes, now go write. And when I started writing, like I said, a lot of it was written for me. Mm. It's almost like the show just came to me. I never sat down and said, okay, today I'm writing. There was never that moment. I would have this like weird late night creativity where things would just come to me. I just saw the show. I would see it through all the stories that I have. I would see the staging. I would see the lighting. And it truly came to me. And I know that sounds very woo-woo, but it's true.
Very true. And I know that, as John said, I've had experience in hanging around hospitals with the nurses and the aides. And John will probably know about this, but in newsrooms, there's a certain sort of, I want to say gallows humor. When something really bad happens, and something bad happens every day in a newsroom, that's what it's there for, to take care of the bad.
To tell everybody.
Right. And so there's a certain sort of gallows humor where you get into telling really, really unacceptable jokes about really terrible things just to get your mind off it. And I found the same thing with nurses and aides. When you're in a bad situation and you're coming in for transfusions every couple of days and it takes a couple of hours and it's not very comfortable, the nurses are there to take your mind off it. And I'm sure you found that with the people that you worked with. And that's probably where a good place to get a lot of characterization from those nurses who do this every day for 100 people
God bless
a week. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And at times I try to reflect and say, am I doing this in service of me doing a character and making someone out to be something that they're not, or am I truly performing the essence of who that person was to me at the time? And as long as I'm staying true to that, I felt really comfortable performing them. But I even say it in my show, even though some of these experiences were sometimes awkward or felt really ironically funny and not really that, maybe not even funny at the time, but later looking back was funny and was the only way I could process the information. But regardless of what kind of humor it was that came about from this time and the kind of experiences I had, these wild, wacky, unique personalities were what got me through treatment. And they were a large part. I mean, they literally brought me back to life in so many different ways, if you will.
That's really interesting. So as we were mentioning, Lymphomaniac, which you just finished a run of, it's I wouldn't say an updating, but it's kind of an echo with new stuff thrown into it of having cancer is hilarious. And I don't want you to, tell us everything, but can you characterize how the second play is different from the first? Can you tell us a little bit about what you've reworked, what you're doing, what you thought you should be talking about now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously it's been 10 years now, going on 11, since I was first diagnosed and went through treatment, and I'm not the same person as I was 10 years ago. So naturally I cannot do the same show. And also I have a different perspective on things, and I've had a bunch of other things happen since then, whether they're related to cancer or not. And I couldn't just go up and do the same thing. And it took a lot of reflection a lot of reflection, and I'll say that writing this show was significantly harder than writing the first show, because this show is actually the second act, at least. So I do, in the first act, I do somewhat of a condensed version with some things added here and there. I added one little extra spicy character in there that is probably one of my favorite parts of the show. And then I added a whole second act that's what's happened since. And I take you through all of the things in my life that have been affected from this experience that I had 10 years ago. And the first show, you can almost tie it in a little bow at the end. I had cancer. I used humor to get through it. And now I'm better. And you can walk away feeling good about that. And yes, it's difficult to watch, especially if you know someone who's been through cancer, you've been through yourself. Obviously, there's a lot of sadness around there, but it is a story of overcoming something and, and moving past it. Yeah. Whereas this show, actually, what's so different about this show is that there's no bow at the end. What the ultimate message is of this show is that we all have things in life, whether it's cancer or something else. We all have our own traumas or moments in our life that change us. And it's how you deal with the repercussions of that and how you heal from those things. And the overall message is that healing is not linear. It's not something that just ends one day. It's something that you're continuing to work on, and the ability to give yourself grace for not being over something that happened 10 years ago, could be 50 years ago, could be however long ago. But it's that it's a never-ending thing. Like, cancers will always be with me, and my life has been greatly impacted in both negative and positive ways from having been sick. So it's a reflection of that. And it felt very raw. It felt very vulnerable to do. I was really scared to do this version. I actually contemplated not doing a lot of the second act and had to have this internal battle with myself, and ultimately decided, you know what, this is actually of service to other people. This is bigger than me. This message, it's no longer about me. It's about finding a way to invite people to have more open and vulnerable, raw conversations about mental health and wellness. And that can stem from something that's happened to you physically or not, but using humor as that access point, because it's too hard. Dawn, as you mentioned earlier, the nurses making jokes and things like that, or people going through tough times, using humor as a tool to get through. Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's one of the tools, but there are so many other tools as well. And I dive into a lot of what those things are. So it's no longer like humor is the answer. It's like, yeah, humor's part of me, but also life isn't always funny. And the things that happen to you you can't always laugh them off. And it's about finding ways to heal yourself and finding ways to forgive yourself for the parts of you that are not ever going to be fully healed.
Yeah, because the one of the ideas that came to me when you were talking about the show, and I've seen the little clip show that you put together of pieces of it, is very much a Pagliacci thing, laughing so you don't cry. And it's funny that you say that the humor is just part of what you're dealing with as you heal, because sometimes people laugh so they don't cry, so they don't have to think about the things that make them cry and deal with them. And so that's an interesting thing to have you say that.
Yeah.
Well, what you just said, I'd like to just go off of that a little bit and expand on that thought of laughing so you don't cry. That is really what the first show is about. And this show is really about laughing and also being okay crying. And it's that balance of the two, and that both can be true at the same time, both can exist at the same time, and that it's okay to have both. I actually am inviting my audience in this show more than in the last show to cry with me, to reflect on their own lives of what they haven't dealt with. And it's an invitation to open up that conversation to something that's deeper.
Yes, I remember when my father died. You never met him, Megan. you would have enjoyed him, and he would have really enjoyed you. And we're all sitting together in the limousine, a whole bunch of us, because I'm the eldest of 9, and there were, we took 2 limousines to the burial ground, and my youngest brother Patrick was sitting there across from me, sitting next to Mommy. Okay, so this thing has happened, and there's suddenly this has happened, and little Pat says, "So they're going to put Daddy in a box, and he's going in the ground. Are worms going to eat Daddy?" And then he started to laugh as hard as he could. Is that the way he asked it? Are worms going to eat Daddy? And we just couldn't stop laughing the whole way. I mean, as we got to the burial place, we couldn't stop laughing. And finally, Mom was the one who said, we've got to do something. We can't get out of this limousine going, just staggering. And we've got to, please. And she was pleading with all of us. And we had to stay in the car for just a moment. Everybody thought it was the opposite reason, that we were grieving and wanted to pull ourselves together. It was the reverse. And it was is a very Timpane thing to do, but it was also sort of very cleansing. But it was also hysterical. That is to say, we were where we were, and it wasn't great. And the laughter sort of let it hang out together for a moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Great example, or great parallel.
Absolutely.
Now, the friends that helped you put the show together, how did they, like when you were in the hospital and your friends came over and you would do some rehearsals and that sort of thing? I know that when people get sick, sometimes there's sort of a leper quality to it. I want to say, we don't want to disturb that, or we don't want to get too close to that. There's that sort of thing. What sort of reaction did you get from your friends, and how supportive or non-supportive were they when you went into that situation?
Writing both versions of the show, I've had this really unique opportunity with having been sick to reflect on how many people in my life love me and support me. And I consider myself so immensely lucky for the support. I have such an expansive support system, if you will. And when I was going through treatment, I realized that that's not true for everyone. And I realized that that was really, really unique. I was the only person at chemo who would have friends coming to visit me from LA or New York or wherever it was. And people would take shifts and go on different weekends. And I even had friends stay at next door neighbors' homes who offered up their homes because my white blood cell counts were low. I had strangers who had heard about my story sending me boxes of 1,000 paper cranes that they had folded in my honor. I mean, I had so many people who just jumped right in. And on the flip side of that as well, I lost a lot of friends. There are people who just don't know how to handle illness and are not familiar with it, haven't had experience with it. And I look back a lot and have this really interesting inner argument with myself that if it happened to one of my friends, I'd like to think I would be there for them in the way that they were there for me. But being honest with myself, I don't think that I would have been. And that's a really hard pill to swallow. And that's because I had never really dealt with that. But I think it taught me that that's how I want to now show up for people. And that's kind of person that I want to be. And yes, at first it really sucked to lose even some of my best friends, completely ignored when I was sick. But learning to forgive people afterwards, because it's not about how much they love you. It's about their own stuff that they haven't figured out how to deal with, or they haven't figured out how to face. But forgiving those people and being able to move on. I mean, for some of my friends, it took years. For some people, it was quick. But yeah, it's difficult. And there's so many different times, whether it's cancer or anything else. Like it could be you lose a spouse, or you lose your job, or you get divorced. And your friends stop talking to you, or you just hear less from people. And I've had such a continuous amount of almost aggressive support. And as
We're going to take care of you whether you like it or not.
but truly, and as a fun example of this, I actually had some of my girlfriends come up to go to chemo with me. And like I said, I had a lot of girlfriends coming up from LA who are my best friends from college, just taking turns coming with me to chemo. And one of my favorite stories was when I got home from chemo, I would sometimes be emotional I say for no reason, but truly almost for no reason. It was like your hormones, I was put into menopause during treatment. Let's just throw that out there. So my hormones were going nuts. And after chemo, obviously I was a little bit out of it coming home. So I warned them in advance, hey, when I get home from chemo, I tend to cry randomly for about 5 minutes and I can't control it. And it just happens. And then I move on to the rest of my day and I'm totally fine. But for whatever reason, something just wells up and I have to cry. And so my girlfriends took this as a really fun opportunity to make me perform while I was crying this parody video of a sorority girl crying about making it snow with a fire extinguisher while she was drunk. After sorority announcement, and they go, we know you know all of the words. So as we get home and as I start welling up and I go, oh my gosh, okay, you guys can leave the room. Like, please leave. I'll be okay in 5 minutes. I'll call you back in. And my friend Anna goes, no, and gets out her phone and goes, we're recording. Okay, so do the video. And I go, no, I don't want to. She goes, do the video.
Yeah.
Took it as a fun opportunity to film me going, I just wanted to make it snow. And I'm really it was one of those, like, you just take what's happening and you don't put so much pressure on it to be like the worst. It is the worst thing in the world that you can imagine, having cancer when you're young, but taking those moments and those opportunities to change the narrative and to own your own experience was something that my friends gave me that was so invaluable to my experience.
And did the video show up on TikTok? Or?
I need to go find that video. I do not know where it is. I don't think I've seen it for 9 years. But this reminds
On the other hand, maybe you don't really need to go find that video. No, actually, it would be a hoot. I think you probably broke the house. You probably knocked it out of the park on that one, Megan. I could just see you doing that. Talk about the Edinburgh Fringe. For folks who don't know what that is, once a year in August, Edinburgh, Scotland becomes the center of the arts world. It has, first of all, theater is probably the biggest single thing. The Edinburgh Festival is your basic theater festival, and then there's the Fringe, which is all around the big festival. The Fringe is 3,000 acts at 300 venues, and it's a lot like that. Plus, at the same time, the Edinburgh Books and Literature Festival is happening. So the biggest names in English, Scottish, Irish, and European writing are walking around watching plays and stuff. So you've decided to put yourself right in there. Megan, I want to hear your thoughts.
Well, it's funny because the story actually starts 11 years ago. Or 12-ish years ago. I was studying at the British Academy of Dramatic Arts at Oxford, and after we were done with the program, my friends and I, we took the train up to Edinburgh and we saw the Fringe. And we went to the Fringe in Edinburgh. We stayed for a few days. We saw quite a few shows and had a great experience. Unbeknownst to me, and when I first arrived at BADA, I actually had cancer and I didn't know it. Mm-hmm. And I fainted the first night I was there. And actually ended up hitting my head on the dresser and getting a black eye.
Oh, gee.
Vomiting all over the floor. Yeah, it was awful. It was horrible. And then I made up a Lady Macbeth monologue because I had hit my head and couldn't remember it in front of the world's leading Shakespeare experts with a black eye and vomit in my hair. And they put me in the absolute worst group. Oh, it was terrible. Not a good showing, but we made it through. And I remember one of my professors at the end of the program going, why were you put in that group? And I go, well, this is what happened. And they go, yeah, I was confused as to why you made up a Lady Macbeth monologue. And I go, because I couldn't remember it. And it hit my head. It's funny, but also I didn't know that the reason was because I had cancer. And as I was taking the train up to Edinburgh, I felt so sick and like I was going to pass out that I contemplated going to the emergency room. And I didn't know what to do. And I finally got there and calmed myself down, and some of the symptoms went away. I went about the festival, and I just was feeling really off during the entire festival.
Of course.
No idea. And it's also just one of those festivals that it's like a bucket list item for actors. I mean, it's the #1 theater festival in the world and comedy festival in the world. And I never thought that I would be performing there ever, ever, ever. In fact, I don't even act anymore. Other than this show, I haven't acted in 6 or 7 years. And I just made the active decision not to be an actor, not to be a part of the industry. I teach public speaking and I teach executive communication for a living. That's my full-time job. But I felt really compelled to bring this back because it just felt very serendipitous. I was offered a spot at a theater in San Francisco over a year ago and said, no. I was at a work event. I said, no, but thank you. They had heard about my show. My tenure of being diagnosed came around and I thought, well, maybe, hold that thought. Maybe I could. I have some things I've been thinking about. Let it percolate, called them up, said, are you sure you're interested? They said yes. So then I rewrote the show. And then I had the thought of, why not? Why not apply? The reception that I got in December was not significantly different than the first time I performed the show 10 years ago, but it impacted me in a different way. What people were saying about the show and what stood out to them and what their takeaways were different this time around. And it's once again, it was the sense of feeling like this was bigger than me and feeling like it's something that needs to be said. And it's one of those moments in your life, and I think they're few and far between. So if you have them, latch onto them, but a moment where you feel like you are giving out as much as you're getting back. The sense of dharma, if you will. It just felt like there was no question. I just immediately thought, I've got to go to the Fringe. There was no like, should I do this with it or that with it? No, immediately it popped into my head. And I said, yeah, I'm going to apply. Even though I have a full-time job, I'm taking a month off in August to go do this. And my bosses are totally supportive. So it's this weird serendipitous moment, as if the first show was meant to happen.
Yes.
And then the second show was meant to happen in a really different way. And yeah, I'm really excited to go back. I think it will be a really emotional experience when I get there, for sure.
Now, you're going to be doing a lot of theater in Edinburgh. Are you going to be watching a lot of theater? You're going to go around and do what everyone does, which is go to plays and stand-up comedy and music and have a great time?
I would love to. There's a couple of things that come to mind when you say that. One, it is likely I'm going to probably have to work, even though I said I was taking a month off. It's likely August is a really busy month for my own personal clients, and it's likely I'll be working full time, maybe while I'm there. I'm trying to take the time off, but it is likely that I will have to be working at least a good chunk of the time. I'm definitely going to see shows, definitely going to see comedy, but it's just also a matter of taking care of myself and making sure if I'm working and facilitating workshops, seminars, coaching while I'm there, I'm taking care of my voice. I'm doing how many shows? I'm doing 11 shows in 11 days, and I've never done that before. And this show, let me tell you, it takes it out of you. It is not an emotionally easy show. It is a roller coaster of my trauma in front of everyone. And part of what I do for a living outside of that is I teach people vocal cues and things like that. So speaking for 8 hours at a stretch at a workshop and then going and doing the show is just, I have to learn how to take care of myself. So it's I've got to find the sweet spot. I got to find the balance. I need to navigate work and all that. But the short answer is yes, I am going to see shows. Yes, I am going to see comedy while I'm there. I just don't know how much.
That Zoom. hey, I'm going to take a month off. I'll see you later. No. You can Zoom from wherever you
That's
are.
right.
So,
You can't escape. You cannot.
yeah, you won't be totally off work. So, sorry about that.
Well, our guest has been the wonderful Megan Timpane. Her show is Lymphomaniac. It will be playing all over the place. You won't be able to. It'll be an awful lot like Zoom. You won't be able to get out of its way. It's playing in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and as we've just been saying, at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in
Maybe
Maybe New York.
well,
New York.
yeah, in New York for sure. So that's 8 million people there, Meg. But the Edinburgh Fringe Festival from August 13th to August the 24th.
And I shamelessly plug too, if you want to follow along with my journey, I follow along at lymphomaniacshow.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at lymphomaniacshow. I will also be updating my TikTok to reflect at lymphomaniacshow as well. So there will be the trifecta. And I'm also doing a little fundraiser. It's expensive to go to the Fringe. It's going to cost me about $25,000. So if you feel inclined to donate, I have the donation page on my website. So if story inspired you.
And we will give you links to all of her websites on our website. So just go to musicalinnertube.com and find the entry for Megan Timpane, and you'll find all that information right there.
Thank you so much for having me. I so appreciate it. And the conversation was fun and your questions were thoughtful. So thank you.
We love
so
you.
much.
And thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
Hey, let us know how we're doing. Send us an email at musicalinnertube, all one word, at gmail.com.
Do you know someone with a great story to tell? Let us know. Send us an email or log in to our website, musicalinnertube.com, and click on the microphone in the lower right-hand corner to leave us a voicemail.
And while you're on our website, take a few minutes to listen to past episodes of the podcast. They're all there, along with pictures and biographies of our guests, blog posts, and lots more.
And as always, our thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for providing us with our theme music.